He blows the grass into the
paving was
landscaping
like
bed.
paint.
So, you know what, get a rake now, turn it all over, don't let that go.
Evening, board members and residents. I would like to call to order our regular board meeting for Monday, July 14, 2014. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Batanti,
Present.
Mr. Brado,
Here.
Mr. Caprell,
Here.
Mr. Tominello,
Here.
Mr. York,
Here.
Mr. Witt, here, Mr. Verkust.
Here, thank you. Next on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, including the approval of the regular board meeting minutes of June 23rd, 2014, approval of the bills in the amount of $759,468.37, approval of Southeast Michigan Council of Governments fiscal year 2014-2015 membership dues in the amount of $2,670, accepting a donation from James Holka for two park benches to be placed along the bike path at Metro Parkway in Crocker and at the end of the path by the spillway in Jefferson, and to concur with the supervisor to repair the air conditioning unit in the administration building at a cost of $2,766. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the bills in the amount of $759,468.37.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. York. Discussion, board members?
I did have one question on item 5.
Okay.
Is that, did we repair or replace?
Well, it was a repair, but it involved replacing the condensing unit or compressor.
Okay, so repair.
Yeah, it was a repair. I mean, a portion of the system was good, but the main unit on the roof had to be replaced.
Okay.
So it was a 4-ton unit. Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is the approval of the regular agenda. Board members, we did have one addendum, and I was suggesting that perhaps we could add that as item B2 to the agenda. I'm not aware of any other revisions. If not, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
All right. Is there support?
Support.
All right. We've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Caprell to approve the agenda with the addition of item B2. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is announcements. I've got a few announcements. The Harrison Township Public Library will be hosting multiple upcoming events. Tales with Tales will be held Wednesday, July 16th, starting at 1 p.m. Children will have the opportunity to read to a therapy dog for up to 15 minutes. Pre-registration is required, and children must be accompanied by an adult. Special story time with the Harrison Township firefighters will be held this Saturday, July 19th at 2 p.m. Please join us for guest readers from the Harrison Township Fire Department and fire safety tips for kids. The presentation is free. Registration is required. The following Saturday, July 26th, a family movie matinee will be held at 2 p.m. right here, showing the Lego Movie. The event is free, but the folks do ask for a registration. Enjoying and Controlling Critters in Your Yard presentation will take place on Wednesday, July 30th at 7 p.m. Refreshments will be served. Registration is required. To register for these events at the library, you can call 586-329-1261. You can stop in the library and sign up. For all of the events, any children in attendance need to be accompanied by an adult. Our fabulous Harrison Township Beautification Commission presents Inspirations Garden Tour, Saturday, July 26th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Participants will have an opportunity to tour some of the local gardens in our township. If you'd like more information, you can call 586-242-3868. And again, for any of these events, there's links on our township website, so also encourage you to go there and see what else is new in Harrison Township. Any other announcements?
I have one more announcement for Parks and Recreation. August 28th, which is a Thursday night at Waterfront Park, we're going to have the free movie night again. And it's a movie and music. Starts at 6:30, and there'll be more details forthcoming, but just save the date. It's Thursday, August 28th.
Music and a movie. All right,
and a movie.
sounds good. All right, any other announcements? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item B on the agenda regarding a resolution honoring Catherine Bradley, who recently retired from the Treasurer's Office. At a regular board meeting of the Board of Trustees for the Charter Township of Harrison on today, Monday, July 14, we're considering the following resolution. Whereas Catherine Bradley has given distinguished service, dedication, and devotion to Harrison Township, and whereas Catherine Bradley began her career as a clerk in the Planning and Zoning Department, and whereas Catherine Bradley served in the Treasurer's Office for more than 24 of her 25-year career with Harrison Township, and retired as the senior account bookkeeper. And whereas Catherine Bradley has provided exceptional dedicated service to Harrison Township employees, retirees, and residents. And whereas Catherine Bradley has served the American Federal, State, County, and Municipal Employees Union Local 1103.14 for nearly 4 years as steward. And now therefore be it resolved that on behalf of the residents of Harrison Township, the Board of Trustees wishes to thank Catherine Bradley for her service to the community and to wish her long life and happiness. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
A motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Brado. Discussion, board members? Certainly, already we miss Katie. She's an excellent employee. Hearing no comment, seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take a roll call?
Yes, Mr. York,
Yes.
Mr. Brado,
Yes.
Mr. Batanti,
Yes.
Mr. Capral,
Yes.
Mr. Tominello.
Yes.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Verkust.
Yes.
Resolution's adopted.
Thank you, board. Got a little choked up there, I see.
Yeah.
All right, next on our agenda is item B2. Board members, the Capuchin Soup Kitchen as a benefit on the Bay, which is an annual fundraiser held here in Harrison Township. The organizers of this event are looking to apply for a charitable gaming license with the state of Michigan, and they are requesting a resolution from this Board of Trustees that would recognize them as a charitable organization in our community. They recently were offered a large donation on short notice and are attempting to condense the application process so that they might apply for a raffle license. If the board adopts this resolution, it will be prepared and returned to the Benefit on the Bay to be included with their necessary paperwork in applying for the charitable gaming license. I know that there are several members of our community, friends of mine and folks that I'm aware of that are involved in this. It's a worthwhile charity, and I think it's worthy of the resolution that's before you.
Make a motion to adopt the resolution for the Capuchin Soup Kitchen's Benefit on the Bay. Harrison Township, County of Macomb be recognized as a nonprofit organization operating in Harrison Township, and the state consider their approval for a charitable gaming license.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Capel. Was that a motion, or did you have a question?
Oh, well, they jumped out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a bunch of questions.
Sure.
Normally, when we have these types of items on here, which I've never voted against, just for the record, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong here,
Sure.
but normally, I'm a little confused as to, normally when we have a packet, when you have the gaming license, it's normally filled out, so we know who it is, who, what, when, where, why. Normally, we have the 501c3 papers.
Yep.
So we know who's going on, because when I read this, I'm a little confused, because what's on the front here doesn't somewhat match the email. It says the Capuchin Soup Kitchens benefit on the Bay is an annual fundraiser. You know, the organizers are looking to apply for a charitable gaming license. Okay, no problem. Then it says, so it's Capuchin Soup Kitchen benefit on the Bay. Then it says in the motion to adopt the resolution that benefit on the Bay is the nonprofit. But then in the email, it says that we recently formed our own organization, which will allow us to better control how we move forward. So I'm a little confused. Is it the soup kitchen?
Yep.
Is it this separate benefit on the Bay Company? Is it a third party that is now away from that whole group? So I'm just.
I can answer that, because these
and-
are some
and
of the
without
things.
having the documentation,
Right.
I'm just want to
Sure.
make sure I'm doing the right thing.
Absolutely. The Capuchin Soup Kitchen is its own standalone, obviously a very worthwhile charity.
Right.
The Benefit on the Bay is a group of folks, many of whom here are Harrison Township residents, who, over a period of time, formed an annual fundraiser for the benefit of the Capuchin Soup Kitchen. It's typically, I think, in August. They get upwards of 600 folks out to Macrays. So the Benefit on the Bay is specifically a standalone organization that started with a process of saying, hey, let's do a fundraiser and donate these proceeds. As they got further and further into this, they realized that in order to, sometimes you get requests for donations, having a 501c3 license isn't required by the state of Michigan, but it is required with some corporations to solicit donations. So where in the past, they utilized the ability to pull a license from the Capuchin Soup Kitchen, even though they were still doing the same thing, they said, you know what, we'll form our own organization, still with our goal, our primary purpose is to fund the Capuchin Soup Kitchen, to, you know, donate the proceeds, but it's not, the Capuchin Soup Kitchen is not the organization that's applying. It's a group of folks. They recently formed the 501c3. It's important to note that normally we wouldn't add something like this as an emergency addendum, and we probably would have more backup material. But I met with some of the folks in the middle of the week, last week. They were concerned about getting this resolution passed. They still have to satisfy the requirements with the state of Michigan. They have to submit bylaws that satisfy that. Really, our role in this, what the state is asking us is this a legitimate charity that does business in your community? And are you worthy of saying, yes, this is not a fraudulent organization? So the state still verifies whether or not they satisfy their requirement. This is only for the purposes of them getting that charitable license. So they still have to submit bylaws. They still have to submit so many years of, you know, accounting, you know, basically your books and records to show what was your income, what were your expenses. You can be a 501c3 and not satisfy the state, or you can not be a 501c3 and satisfy the state. Those two are independent. But I recognize this application is limited in no small part because I'd said to them, well, you're asking if it's a legitimate charity, you're asking the township to recognize it. And I guess I made the assumption that a lot of folks were familiar with this organization. And I said, you know, give us a request and we'll try to get it on the agenda right away so that they could condense this timeline. And if they do get this large donation, they could have a chance to raffle it off.
Like I said, my only question is, I'm being asked the question, like you had mentioned, is this a legitimate thing? I don't know that right now, sitting here, just listening to you and going by what you're saying, but normally we would have a little bit more information. You know, maybe the gaming license filled out or.
Well, this
you know.
isn't, but this isn't the gaming license. All this resolution is a sample that they gave us. This would be filled out by Adam, or he makes something similar to this.
I understand. I'm just making a point that I would never vote yes on this. Or with the information that I have right now, because I don't know. I'm not familiar with this organization. I'm sure that they've been doing it for 21 years. I'm sure that it's legitimate, but it'd be nice to have just some extra documents to know who's running it, who owns it, you know, much like that other group
Sure.
that we had, I believe, turned down a couple months ago.
Right. That was a different process, but, right.
Well, no, I mean, it would at least be nice to have something, but, you know, I'm just going on what you're saying, that this is legitimate,
Mhm.
you know, at this point.
Okay,
I think
fair
it's a
enough.
worthwhile, and I certainly think we should have brought it at this, you know, at this time, because they need to get a license.
Right, right. Any other thoughts or comments? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Capral to adopt the resolution recognizing the benefit on the Bay, Harrison Township, County of Macomb as a nonprofit organization operating in Harrison Township, and that the state of Michigan consider their approval for a charitable gaming license.
Can I ask one other question? Sure. When we do this charitable gaming license, is this gonna, is this one of those things where it allows like all year, or, cause it looks like they're doing this for a car, are they getting a single use? Cause I know my wife at, you know, the band,
Yep.
she gets a single use license to do a raffle for, she does like this basket.
Sure,
You're
yeah,
familiar
yeah, I'm
with it?
familiar with it,
Yeah.
yep, I've sold a ticket or two.
So is this
So-
a single use or?
Yep, that's a good question. Two-step process. First, the state says, will we give you the legal right to engage in charitable gaming, whether it's bingo, millionaires parties, or raffles? Those are typically the three. If the state looks at the application from any charity and recognizes that it's a legitimate charity, and basically they pass all the requirements. For example, the bylaws have to state that if they dissolve the organization, that they'll donate all of their assets to charity. The fear is the state says, you know, you and I, we start a charity, we build it up, and we say, oh, we changed our mind, and, you know, boom, you head to Maui. So there's several things they do that they look for and they require. And again, they look to us because they say we can't, the state lottery gaming, charitable gaming division can't have a presence in every community, so they count on the local units of government to say, you know, what's your opinion of this organization? If they're successful, they get a 6-digit number. Then, that 6-digit number can be used to pull a raffle license, a bingo license, or say a millionaire party license. So, first step, get the number, you're recognized, then you can apply for raffle licenses. But every time you do, you have to apply, you have to submit a report, and if your report isn't satisfactory, they won't give you another license.
So this is we're at that first step right now.
Correct. Merely seeing if the state will say, yes, we recognize you as a legitimate charity. So,
I'm going on your word here, so.
all right, no, that's no problem, fair question. Mr. Witt, would you take, or are there any other questions? No? Okay, Mr. Witt, will you take the roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkast?
Yes. Thank you, board.
Resolution's adopted.
All right, and thank you to the members of Benefit on the Bay. So,
No offense, I was just, you know, it's, normally it's in the board packet, that's why I'm asking, and we have had a couple charities that really, just say weren't charities, it was more for a personal profit
well,
in front of
yeah,
us.
absolutely, yep. All right, next item on the agenda is item C1. Board members, we've received applications from Miss Catherine Miller and Miss Susan Hogarth for the Library Committee. Miss Miller would be replacing the seat left by Marge Switkowski, and Miss Hogarth will be replacing Miss Donna Dertinger, whose term expires July 13, 2014. Both Miss Miller and Miss Hogarth have been an asset to the library, and I would recommend the appointment of Miss Catherine Miller and Miss Susan Hogarth for a 3-year term to expire July 13, 2017. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to appoint Ms. Catherine Miller and Ms. Susan Hogarth to the Library Committee for a 3-year term to expire July 13th, 2017.
Is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Brado to appoint these two folks to the Library Committee.
I do have a question for Mr. Huth.
Mr. Huth, sorry,
Sorry to
Mr.
interrupt there for a moment, but I do have a question. The library committee, if, you know, we're putting people on the library committee and it didn't seem to really matter too much in the past, but now that there's millage on the ballot, if in fact that millage passes, does this library committee that we're appointing right now hold all the money, or will there be
Do we
another?
appoint a committee?
Is there gonna be another appointed committee and/or a elected body?
Well, Mr. York? Any committee that you appoint is not gonna have, boy, you know what, I apologize. I have not had that issue before, so I'm reluctant to give you a quick answer on
Okay.
it.
And I'm putting you on the spot here, I'm just, you know,
It was my understanding from this issue last year that initially we appoint a committee that eventually is elected. But I mean, I don't have, I'm not gonna be able to quote you, you know, that, but that's what I understood when this question came up last year.
okay. So if we have a library committee right now, let's just say the millage passes, I don't know if it's passing or failing, but let's say it passes, then we'll appoint a new committee interim?
Right.
Is that what happens?
So,
Okay,
here-
that's fine.
yeah, because here's,
Question answered.
right,
We're
because
good.
here's my understanding, these people have not been appointed to manage this new entity. So, it would be my understanding that the creation and the election of a millage to establish an entity that is no longer this free library, or this not, you know, not publicly funded library, would now fall under a different set of rules within the state of Michigan. So that was my
Oh,
understanding.
okay, that's, yeah, I just,
Makes sense, thank you, Ken.
Well, not only that, but I don't know of another board where we don't typically have some sort of a liaison,
Right.
you know, from the board, and I don't know that we currently have that on this board, so.
no, all right, no problem.
But in either case, of course, we're replacing two existing library committee members. Any other discussion? I'll take that out of my retainer. We've got seeing no board comment and no public comment, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Brado to appoint Ms. Catherine Miller and Ms. Susan Hogarth to the Library Committee for a 3-year term to expire July 13, 2017. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on the agenda, item C2, regarding the Employee Pension Board. Board members, we have received an application from Ms. Connie Miller for the Employee Pension Board. Ms. Miller has been an asset to the board, and I would recommend the reappointment of Ms. Miller for a 3-year term to expire June 23rd, 2017. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to reappoint Ms. Connie Miller to the Employee Pension Board for a 3-year term to expire June 23rd, 2017.
All right, is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Caprell. So I have a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Caprell to reappoint Mrs. Connie Miller to the Employee Pension Board for a 3-year term to expire June 23rd, 2017. Discussion, board members? I serve with Mrs. Miller, and Mr. York does too, and she's certainly a valuable member of our pension board. Hearing no other comment and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries. Next on the agenda, item D1. Mr. Witt?
Yes, we received a request from Macomb County for us to approve our Urban County of Macomb renewal for the years 2015 through 2017. This is what allows us to receive money from HUD through the CDBG program. And normally it's an automatic renewal. This is something that the board's approved long ago. But under the 2014 HUD budget, there was some minor changes to the agreement that need to be included in the countywide agreement for us to opt to stay in. So the county has approved the amended agreement, and so the local communities need to approve this amended agreement and send it back to them to continue our participation in the CDBG program.
All right,
Make a motion to adopt the resolution approving the Urban County Cooperative Agreement amended for full years 2015 through 2017.
All right.
Support.
There's been a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Witt to adopt the resolution. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take a roll call?
Yes, Mr. York.
Yes.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Batanti.
Yes.
Mr. Brado.
Yes.
Mr. Capral.
Yes.
Mr. Tominello.
Yes.
Mr. Verkast.
Yes.
Resolution's adopted.
Excellent, thank you. All right, next on the agenda, item E1. Board members, keeping with what I had mentioned at our last board meeting, brought the following agenda item. The Board of Trustees voted at our June 23rd, 2014 regular board meeting to place a millage question on the November 4th, 2014 ballot for up to 1.5 mills for up to 20 years for the purpose of repairing and reconstructing roads in Harrison Township. It was discussed that we need to inform the voters how the funds would be spent and how decisions would be made. Attached is a set of policies which describe the ways in which these funds would be spent. Once these policies are adopted, I will draft an informational piece, which will be brought back to the board for approval. So what you have in the board packet, the second page, is the proposed policies. This is just a typed-up set of policies. And the third or last page is page 11 of our report, which is in essence what the policies state. So when the road subcommittee had drafted their findings, recommendations, the committee came back with these recommendations of how these funds might be spent. This list of policies is at least my stab at, or a first proposal, to say how these funds might be spent. So initially, number one, we've got a road improvement recommendation committee, a 5-member committee, 1 board member, a liaison, 4 citizens that would work with the engineer, township engineer, and township employees, most likely on the water and sewer side, so it might coincide with any infrastructure improvements to look at what the schedule of improvements might be. Number 2, a distribution policy, priority given to a project that's eligible for matching funds or grant funds. Funds would pay for 100% of reconstruction or rehabilitation of current paved roads. Funds will be used to pay for 25% of the cost to reconstruct local private roads, as long as the reconstruction meets or exceeds MCDOR standards, and the road would be then dedicated to the use of the public upon completion. And then funds would be used to pay for 25% of the cost to pave local public gravel roads. I guess local public, local gravel roads, I got a little extra local in there. I wanted to really be
Local happy.
absolutely local. Condominium grants, again, per the recommendation of the subcommittee, a set aside of 5% of the funds collected that would be made available for condominium associations within Harrison Township. The Road Improvement Recommendation Committee would have a responsibility to establish some process for awarding grants and then make recommendations for annual grant awards. And then, again, in keeping with the findings of the report, 2% set aside of the funds placed into a separate fund of maintaining and improving the path system in Harrison Township. So, as I'd mentioned previously, I wanted to make some attempt at trying to form some sort of policies that this board could adopt, either in this form or in some other modified form, so that when we ask folks to consider that millage, we'd be in a position to be able to say how those funds would be dispersed and how we'd consider projects. So looking for some input, discussion, or a motion.
Can I give a couple just pieces of input?
Sure.
And the 5-member committee, I think we should, well, a couple things. If we're doing a 5-member committee, maybe we need to identify that as having somebody from each section of the township.
Okay.
For example, so, I don't know, the residents of North Point Parkway, I'll just use my street, right?
Mm-hmm.
we don't get 4 residents from that street, guess whose street's gonna get done first, right?
Well, it's
so-
recommendation, so it's ultimately the Board of Trustees that decides, but your point's valid. You'd want some, maybe a regional consideration.
Right, I mean, it'd be
We could have
nice,
5 people on the committee from North Point.
Yeah.
right, but you understand what I mean, if we put like, you know, we need to have several people from around the township that live in.
South
in-
End.
South End,
Yep.
West End, East End, whatever.
Mhm.
So it doesn't give one area more leverage on that.
Okay?
But we are, and then the second thing I was going to suggest was that the township board have the final approval on those recommendations.
Correct.
I didn't see that on here, and it might be on here.
Yeah, nope, it's all.
Oh, I
yep,
see, okay, down here.
Yep.
The, will that make it, okay, I didn't see that, I'm sorry. No problem.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
that's,
so we're the final say if.
Absolutely.
So we're sort of, we can,
yeah, I don't know that, I'm not sure that we have the authority to delegate that responsibility to someone else. I mean,
Okay.
I really believe that that expenditure would fall on the Board of Trustees. But what we're saying is there is a need, you know, and it's possible that 5 isn't sufficient. And the reason why I say that is because what we're talking about, say it is a 7-member committee. What we're talking about is one of those 7 members is gonna be one of us. And we're already playing the role of kind of that liaison or representative to the residents. But presumably, say for example, you know, it would be reasonable to say, well, let's have someone from the Huron Point subdivision, and maybe out, you know, the Venice Shore subdivision. I mean, in other words, it isn't as if having too many people is a concern. This is a recommending body. You know, you don't want an unrealistic number of people that you try to get together every time you have a discussion, but you want enough people that can take the message that might come from the county's road department, or from the engineer, or from water and sewer relative to infrastructure, and they can spread that information. So this is, they play a role of disseminating information. Someone is gonna say, well, how come they're taking a road that's a 6 out of 10 and capping it instead of repairing all the roads that are 2s? And, you know, there's a need to deliver, you know, some of the information as to how the decisions are made and what processes go into that. That isn't to say that that's what the committee is going to do, but for example, typically an engineer will say, I think you should spend your first dollar on roads that are in better shape than in poor shape. But obviously, if that's all you do, then you're leaving a whole segment out. So this committee is faced with that understanding, kind of, you know, steering what direction we need to take, but also disseminating some of that information and those ideas to residents within the township. So it could be 7-member, it could be regional. I don't know that, I don't know that we could say, you know, we have to name specific districts, but we could. How many?
We have 10 precincts, and we could
That's what I was
do,
gonna
you know, like
suggest.
precincts 1 and 2, 3,
Yep.
or we have 5 trash pickup days. We could go by the, you know what I mean? There's
some
mechanisms
regional.
there that we could
I
say
would just
are,
need to
are
put some
pretty reasonable.
representation.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I think that's ultimately like, I mean, we're accountable at the end,
Right.
and
Right.
so we're accountable so that we're not putting everybody on, you know, your street on there to get something done. You know, I mean,
But it,
ultimately people are going to yell at us, and that's sort of our responsibility.
but in the same vein, you wanna make sure that, all the people that you put on the board are legitimate candidates to be on the board. And
Oh,
not-
sure.
And not just say, well, I need one more person from this area, and
Right.
it happens to be a person that nobody agrees with. you
Sure.
know. So leave it open-ended enough so that you can,
I mean, you could even include a line if you wanted it. An effort will be made to be
To regionalize the selection, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, ultimately,
Not
we're the
bind
ones
you, but-
selecting this, right?
right.
And that's
not
the thing.
binding, but
Do we establish specific districts? I mean, that could be difficult, but do we look at neighborhoods as a whole and try to balance the membership? I think that's a good point. Ultimately, though, that's a responsibility that kind of falls to us.
Right.
Bill?
I think that having regional representation is a great idea.
Yes.
What, can we leave this more open-ended then? Instead of saying 5-member citizen board, can't we say citizen board with consideration given to regional representation and leave it at that for the purpose of this?
Yeah, at this stage, yeah, there's no problem. Really, what I'm looking for in this policy is for this board to adopt some policy so that when residents ask questions, you know, you're gonna ask me for $1.5 million? What are you gonna do with it? Well, we don't really know, we just want you to, I mean, I think it's fair to say to folks, this is what we're gonna do, this is how we're gonna manage this is the process we're gonna follow. So, I'm not sure if, I think it would be meaningful to voters to know that the committee is gonna be, you know, comprised of citizens that are selected regionally throughout the township,
Agreed.
right? I don't know if it has to be 5, 7, you know, I mean, that's ultimately up to us.
And just, it might make sense to include something in here that meetings of this committee will be open to the public.
Yep.
Because as a recommending body, they technically don't fall under open meetings, or, you know, that could be perceived that way. It might make sense to include something in there that said, they're open to the public, they'll follow the guidelines of the Open Meetings Act. So that way there's an opportunity for public comment, there's some minutes that'll be drafted, published, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So that way, it's as open of a process as we can make it.
And you're talking a lot of money.
Yeah,
That
yeah, I don't-
passes. I mean,
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
think a
Yep,
lot of
that's
people
fair.
are,
It's a
you
lot of
know,
money.
wanna come and sit in and talk.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yep.
One other suggestion, when we get down to the point-by-point, 100% the cost of reconstruction of local roads, I would recommend that we say 100% of the cost of reconstruction of local paved roads, 100% of the rehabilitation of local paved roads. Because taken out of context, one might confuse that with.
It's on the second page, that third page is from the report. The policy is just that
Number
second
2
page.
on
if
No,
you go
yeah,
back
the
a
second page is the policy. So that's item 1 in fund distribution on the second page. The second page would be that policy. So, well, so what I'd say is take a look at number 2 on fund distribution and see if that's,
I'm sorry.
that may satisfy.
Current paved roads, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're absolutely
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. That's why we're
I
talking
just
about
think
it.
we need to, that is something that needs to be clearly highlighted, and it is.
so what threw me on that Board of Trustees,
Can I just
Go
stop?
right ahead, I'm sorry.
Just on the previous comments, because I want to keep good notes. Are we saying we believe 5 members is not enough? Do we?
that's what I was gonna bring
Oh,
up
I'm
too, was
sorry.
that, yeah.
That's what that, well, that was because I said that we could be 5, could be 7, someone threw out each precinct,
I
and
would
then
say
you'd mentioned we may not have to
A
define it.
minimum of 5.
Well, but I mean, I think there's value. Again, if we're gonna establish and we're telling people what we're doing,
I'm good with 5.
the less variables that we have going forward, I think the better that people can say, okay, you've
And it-
established a process.
So really, but you're gonna have a committee of 5 residents.
Could be 7,
You're
that's
gonna have
what I'm saying.
employees, and you're gonna have the township engineer. So already you're gonna have, from what I'm looking here, at least 7, maybe 8.
Yeah, township engineer and employees would not be, I mean, they're a member of the committee,
Well,
they're
that's what I mean,
recommending, but
I'm
those,
talking
that
about
7-member
total.
body.
So total,
Right,
you're probably 7 or 8. So if you make it 7, you're gonna be 10 or better.
right,
And I'm okay with that.
right. What I'm saying is the more, I'm not expecting Dave Newmer to share this information at Kroger on Sunday when a resident has a question, or if someone's coming out of their place of worship and say, hey, what's going on? I know you serve on that committee. I'm saying we want 7, I'm suggesting, I said 5, it could be 7 members that are in that position to interface with the public. Those 7 members are going to receive they're in essence gonna receive information and recommendations from Department of Roads and from the engineer, and maybe, you know, Mr. Axtell saying, you know, well, I'm concerned about that road because the infrastructure is really bad.
So my question would be then, are the employees, the engineer, and maybe Mr. Axtell, are they going to be voting members?
No, a 5-member committee is gonna work with those
Okay.
employees. That's what I'm suggesting.
Thank you.
So in other words, planning commission certainly hears from Mr. Maher, but he's not a voting member. I'd treat him as a same.
Okay,
And
no, I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. Supervisor, I would think then, I would still go back and say that at this juncture, we could still leave it without a number on it and to be determined. But
Okay.
if we needed a number this evening, I think that given the fact that we want a regional approach or whatever we want to call it, which is a good idea, then 7 might be a better number
Yeah.
if we have to put a number on it tonight.
I'd be comfortable with 5 if maybe the whoever's our liaison maybe is just, you know, acts as the chair to the meeting, maybe doesn't have a you know, sometimes you can have a de facto member that doesn't necessarily vote, but if you're gonna include them as part of that voting body, I think 7 probably makes,
I think you just do
because
7 members.
otherwise you just have 4 people not.
Sure. Say Larry serves on that board, he represents his community just
Yeah.
as well as anyone else. So that's one of the 7 members, but he happens to be the liaison.
You know,
I'd rather
and
see
here's the whole
7.
thing, I would think that people that you elect to this committee are going to be very methodical in their judgment. I mean, so, you know, just because I'm in here a point, I'm not am I really gonna vie to have Huron Point done first? Probably not.
Well, if you do, you're only one of 7,
And
so.
then, but then say if we do.
Right.
But now I have to vote on all the other regions within the
Correct,
township. So,
right.
so I, you know, 5 or 7, I don't think it's gonna make a big difference. I think getting the right people, getting the right information at the meetings, you know, conducting the meetings properly and making sure that we make progress and head in the right direction is gonna be the important part.
Okay. So if I said that, would we say members will serve 3-year terms? 2
you
members
go-
will be appointed each year, is that
If you do
reasonable?
7, Mr. Supervisor?
Yeah,
is that
because there's
fair?
really 6 that would be, and then the appointee usually serves for the term as a trustee. So does anyone have a concern with a 3-year term? Because there is an education that goes with this, and similar to any of the other, you know, boards or commissions you serve, your first time on ZBA, there's quite a bit to absorb, and the longer that you serve, the more you learn, so.
So the first round of appointments will be for, 2
One.
people will be 1, 2 people will be 2, 2 people will be 3 years.
You got it, yep, and that, yep,
And then the
absolutely.
trustee would be appointed, and we normally appoint liaisons for their term as an officer of the board.
Yep, so we would revise this to be a 7-member committee. We would, there needs to be added that their meetings would be public, and that they'll be comprised, the members will be appointed based on regional representation, or based on, you know, their location throughout the township, something along those
I
lines.
don't know, you could just say something with an eye toward that. I mean,
Yeah.
you might not have somebody that lives in like a certain area, you know?
Right, right,
We
but
don't
you-
get very many people signing up for committees as it is, so.
No, but I think,
know.
yeah, I think we want to say it's based on that. I mean, it doesn't say, I don't think we want to define this neighborhood.
That's my
that
point, I don't
yeah.
wanna
Yeah.
later on find that we don't have, you know, people from, say, the middle of the township applying, and, you know, we did our best,
Right,
you know.
no,
Well,
I think that's a
maybe-
good point.
So the point is that we say something that's a little, an attempt will be made
Right.
Yeah.
to get representation from various.
Yeah,
regions
appointments
of-
will be based on regional representation. We're basing it on that, to the extent
To
that
the
you can.
extent, yeah.
Yeah, someone doesn't come from, you know, no one from Venice Shores agrees to serve, we obviously can't appoint someone from there. But I anticipate that if this is successful, we will see, you know, this is, when I think of all the issues that people come to the township to talk about, the condition of local roads is definitely one that generates a lot of passion. You know, I mean, I think our application, if we're successful in this millage and we form this committee, we'll have applications well in excess of the chairs that we have available. That's my guess, because I think there are a lot of people that are very motivated, and have strong feelings about the subject.
I do have just one more item. The reason that I missed that about the Board of Trustees, we should put, you know, where it says condominium grants and the path and trail maintenance, at the end there it says
RIRC, yep.
RIRC will make recommendation to the Board of Trustees for path maintenance. I think we need to put that line up at the top too. It says road improvement recommendation. I think we should put something, the RIRC will make recommendations to the Board of Trustees for approval.
Right, yep, to
In
clarify
In
that.
that paragraph.
Or even
at-
under
at
the
top.
fund distribution, to have like an item 5 that said all distributions will be approved
That's why I
Right.
missed
on
that, because it was
recommendation from the
down,
board.
Yep.
you know, I
Something
was
like
looking
that.
at the
Yep,
general
so,
guidelines, right?
so what I would say is the RIRC will make an annual recommendation to the Board of Trustees for distribution of funds based on the following guidelines,
Right,
right?
and then that'll. spell
And then
it out.
1, 2, 3, 4, yep,
Because somebody could come back and say, well, that's only for the
Correct.
condominium, or that's only for the
Correct.
bike path.
yep, yep.
You know, that's not really our intention.
Okay, so the first line of that fund distribution would say, I'm just abbreviating, the RIRC will make annual recommendations to the Board of Trustees to distribute funds based on the following guidelines, because they're making annual, it's a
Right.
recommendation.
Right, just so it's out there and
Right.
everybody knows.
Right,
you know.
that- but, and Mr. Huth, again, I'll kind of defer to you there, but I don't think we could, I think it would be difficult to delegate the responsibility of spending, or if not impossible, to another committee, true?
True, that one I know that answer.
Okay.
Right.
I didn't want to put you in a corner there, you know? Yeah, you go 0 for 2 and you're gonna get in a slump, you know?
We want a refund.
Okay, all right.
Would it make sense to table this to come back? But I know part of the process was you talked about maybe bringing some, maybe cost or a brochure or something forward for us. I think it's safe to say that if we do them both at the same, I mean, we've talked about this, but if we table this and bring the other at the same time, I think
Yeah,
personally I'm comfortable talking about them both now that we've
Right.
hashed this out a little bit without.
There wasn't that many changes. I mean,
No,
really.
no, I mean, I've got notes. I mean, the revisions that we're talking about here, let's make sure we understand a couple things. We're not saying that this policy is somehow gonna be locked in a, you know, in a glass case. I mean, we have the opportunity, it's certainly feasible that a resident could come forward and say, well, had you considered this? I mean, this is, we're plowing new ground here. We may find when we get into this that 2% for paths is exceptional, and say, wow, you know, you're putting away 50 grand a year and you just don't need it, and you're not spending it at that rate, or 20 grand, or whatever it amounts to, and we may find ourselves in a position saying that later we want to, you know, adjust some of these figures. But, you know, for the purposes of where we stand today, I was trying to establish some sort of policy. I have absolutely no problem bringing this back along with some sort of, you know, artwork or piece that we'd say, what do you think of this brochure? Because I don't, you know, this is an action of the Board of Trustees. I'm trying to take the lead and make sure that we move forward. I want to make sure that our residents are informed about this, so when November comes, people, you know, it's available on the website, and, you know, we can mail one to every home. Not saying you should vote for it, obviously, or vote against it, but, you know, questions and answered. This isn't the first time that a public millage has been supported by a document that explains the questions and answers, that sort of thing. And then people can vote for themselves. So if there aren't any more recommendations, we can certainly table this, and I can revise it, bring it back before the board, along with some artwork. I don't think we should talk about distributing anything about this until well after the August election, because I don't want people to be looking for this in August or confused as to when it comes. There's enough stuff on August ballot, and there'll be plenty on November's ballot also. But in terms of an educational, you know, informational process, this seems like September, October is when folks are gonna begin to, you know, not to say we're hiding the information, but I don't wanna send out a flyer, you know, 3 months in advance and confuse folks before the election in August. So we're not up against some deadline, is my point, at least in the short term.
Mr. Supervisor, just a few things. On path and trail maintenance and improvements, we talk about maintaining and improving. I guess my question would be, does that include snow removal, grass cutting? And if so, I think we need to state that.
Well, we currently take that from general fund. I would think that if we had a fund for this, that would be the logical place to take the funds. I mean, that
that's what I'm
adds up
saying.
to be
So-
about $3,000-4,000 a year,
And that's
but
what I'm saying. So
Yep.
does that, so maintaining and improving, you know, when you look at maintaining, a little misleading, because to me, it could be if it's road improvement millage, it may just be maintaining the surface.
Mhm.
But if you're gonna include snow removal and grass cutting, I think that needs to be, itemized. The other thing is, I didn't see anything as far as drainage and how it's gonna be used as far as a policy. The other question that I had, that we might wanna bring into play is, bridges. Are bridges gonna be included as a part of this, or is it just roads?
Yep, good point. So,
Then, and then
Oh,
one
sorry.
last thing is on, and I know this was taken from Roy Trim, but on page 2, or actually page 3,
yes,
you have 1.25 mils, and it's actually 1.50 mils.
Right.
And I understand that just a little tight, you know.
well, the recommendation was
At
1.25.
the time.
Right,
So I just want to make
absolutely.
sure you don't miss that and
Yeah.
update
That's
that.
that's not part of the that's not part of the policy. That's just showing.
That's just
Source
show,
material.
yeah, the backup. How did I come up with the stuff? It was based on
But
what the
shouldn't the
recommendation.
policy say that how much,
Well, the policy is just, it says, the policy is intended to define the way in which
Okay.
we'll allocate and spend the funds.
Okay.
So, for example, we may get into this and find that a mill is all we need,
Okay.
and that's why it's up to, right?
that's fine, yep.
Specific to the drains, what I didn't include that because two reasons. One is I wouldn't pretend to be able to suggest that as a policy, we can say what needs to be done with drains. So, in other words, just as we might not say within this policy, the method that we're gonna use or the materials we're gonna use, I'm looking at drains as being kind of that total process of doing the roads. But I'm not gonna use the policy to tell Dave how to do drains as much as I'm gonna be looking for Dave to tell us which areas need to be
No, but does
improved.
does it make sense to say drainage will be provided as needed or something like that, you know? I guess, or as determined by the engineer, or,
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but I mean, so will other things, so could other improvements, you know. 'cause we-
Material of the road.
Right, right. I'm concerned that I mean, we're saying we added money because Dave didn't consider drainage in that. And we added money acknowledging the fact that it's really a guess for how much that it is. But to say, you know, we added it because we said we should consider drainage. But I mean, that's as far as I can go. I don't know at this point, for example, if I can say how much he can do. And like Dave pointed out, on one road, you may say, well, the drainage system in this road is pretty good. You get to another road and you'd say, wow, this drainage system on this particular road is really bad. And unless we improve something somewhere else in the drain system, merely fixing the drains on this road isn't gonna solve the problem, because we gotta get this water to, you know, the Ventre de Buff. That was why I was concerned including it. The other thing was bridges, and I have no problem saying that. Certainly it's our intent, but primarily where I've covered that was on number 1. Priority will be given to any project which is eligible for matching or grant funds.
Okay.
So you figure, if I can get 97.5% of the cost of a bridge done for 2.5%, you know, to say that I wouldn't include it, I'm treating a bridge, road, you know, same thing.
okay, thank you.
But again, it's all ultimately comes down to us. We get to vote, even when we're done with this, we're gonna vote on it anyways. Yes, sir.
If I can make just a quick suggestion, if you are gonna talk about drainage, you might wanna make a distinction between, roadside, road drainage versus county drain,
Correct.
backyard drainage.
And that's, and
So
that,
that's not confusing that, because I don't
Correct.
believe it's your intent to cover county drains, it's your intent to cover roadside, road drainage.
right.
So
So,
that might be helpful for the residents to understand that distinction.
absolutely. But again, that's why specifically I'm trying, when we went from 1.25 to 1.5, it was to say, let's make sure that we have a buffer so that when we get to certain roads where there is a drain crossing, there's an acknowledgement that we need to replace that drain. When there are drains that run parallel to the road, let's make sure we clean those out. If we get to one particular area where a culvert has collapsed, we need to remove that so that the rest of the drains on that road work. So it's an acknowledgement that there's money, but it isn't as if we said there's $250,000 for drains. We just said, let's make sure that we have additional funding so that as drain issues come up, we handle them. But definitely, this is road improvements. So to be, you know, cutting diagonally through someone's backyard on a county drain, there's a funding process for that, and this is not it.
And that, the only concern is if Larry had brought up, some stuff that we already pay for with general fund money.
Mm-hmm.
Are we only looking at that part of road maintenance that we fund with general fund money? I mean, currently we also pay up to $10,000 for dust control on dirt roads.
Correct.
I mean, are we saying that would come
Yeah.
out of here instead
Yeah.
of general, or are we saying?
Roads are roads.
That's right.
Well, that's why I just want to make
Yep.
sure there's an understanding that there's some other.
Well, that's a good point,
other
because,
costs
there's
that
the whole thing, right? I mean, people who live on dirt road, if they're not gonna be improved anytime soon, they're still gonna want their, you know, surface oiled or sprayed, so that makes sense.
Yep. And the other area where we have a cost is there was a cost share on the Bridgeview Bridge, which is currently a general fund line item. I mean, that happens to be after the fact, you know, and obviously the only other source we have currently is general fund. But maybe when we talk about fund distribution, maybe we put a line item number 5 saying funds will be used for gravel road maintenance, right? I mean, you know, to the extent that, again, this committee considers it and this board looks at it, one of the sources of that funding could be maintenance on the gravel road.
I wouldn't say maintenance, I would just say dust control program. I'd be specific about it, because maintenance is
That's
different
so
than
wide,
dust
that's-
control.
Right,
That could be,
right. Well, but again, there are
I
a
know.
few local dirt roads that happen to be private, and there is no funding structure, even though the cost to do some grading on that road is really small. Those residents don't have a means unless they go around door to door and collect.
Right.
But for a few $1,000s, once or twice a year, when the county's doing that, when we're their partner, when we say grade this road, it's private, they'll do it and send us a bill. They won't do it to residents or citizens, but, you know, there would be a place where you'd be saying to those folks, until such time as you're able to pave your dirt road, you know, we'll have the county go down on that private road and do some basic maintenance, do some, you know, I mean, I think that's a reasonable expense.
You know what, exactly, and if they're gonna be paying the millage, probably that's something they're gonna expect.
Right, and and I think that's a reasonable thing, because it puts us in a position where now we have a source of revenue, and we have a partner in the county. We're not questioning whether or not the county is a reasonable partner, but they just don't regularly go out and do work for an individual citizen, but they will establish a working relationship with the township and do work on our behalf. So you say, all right, well, these folks are paying a millage, there'd be a benefit, and it could be maintenance, could be, you know, they go out and say, well, we'll do some work to do some basic repairs in an area. So,
I mean, if we're gonna get into a private road discussion, I mean, a private road, I mean, I get that they pay some of the millage, but, you know, it's their private road. They can do whatever they want with it, and, you know, any other road in the community, you know, anybody can drive on. And we're gonna have to probably have more debate on the private road, deal, and how much it costs and.
right, well, we're talking about, really what we're talking
I
about is maintenance of
understand.
gravel roads, which is typically gonna be
understand.
dust
I
control or
understand.
grading.
I understand.
So the maintenance of gravel roads isn't a huge expense. The question is whether or not we add an item to say that the cost of maintaining gravel roads in the township would be included in the funding.
It would seem to me that there, you know, while we want to be informative, I don't know that this document is intended to be one that completely details the whole policy. And so I would think that we should err on the side of not putting something like that in so as not to confuse the residents in terms of what might be done. I mean, it
Yep.
could cause more concern.
Right, so specific to that, and that's an excellent point, when I got to the idea of the condominium grant in terms of how to write a policy, I'm not sure that I'm prepared to say how you'd go through that process, but we're saying that committee may agree to look at, you know, some other communities and how they might have done something like this, and they can form that grant process. I don't know that I have to define that. I do think there is value. Realistically, this board can say, we will spend money on gravel roads or we won't. And I think it would be unreasonable for us to say, we're gonna assess taxes up and down folks that are on gravel roads, but we're not gonna acknowledge in this document that we're gonna pay for maintenance on those gravel roads. I think that's,
And I think we should identify that the general fund expenditures, if we have a source of money outside of the general fund that's made on these types of items, that
Yeah.
would normally,
this will be used for
this
that.
should be used for that.
So if we're going to talk about maintenance on gravel roads, do we have to be somewhat more specific then? I don't, I'm just asking the
Again, and
question.
here's the thing, the answer is, someone says, well, I'd like you to spend $2.5 million on dumping all new gravel on my road. This board can say that's just an unrealistic expense. On the other hand, say, well, you know what, there's a stretch of road that Department of Roads won't grade, but they pass by there, and for an extra $500 when they're out grading, they'll grade that road. To me, I believe our school buses travel on that road. You know, fixing that road is gonna bring us back more than $500 and bring our residents back more than $500. So, as it pertains to, you know, the application of a brine or chloride product, or, you know, grading wherever there may be gaps in their grading process, I don't see that as a significant expense, but one where we say, yes, this fund, you know, we talk to the county. County says, yeah, we'll work with you and we can do X, Y, and Z. I think that's one where we, you know, where we acknowledge to the voters that we're gonna fund maintenance on gravel roads. What's maintenance? That comes for the engineer, the subcommittee, and ultimately this board to decide. But at least to say that's an intent of this board to put forth funding for maintenance of gravel roads. I think it's worthwhile to include in the policy, if everyone's comfortable with that. Okay, Any other suggestions? Even if I don't have an informational piece, at a bare minimum, I'll make these improvements to this policy, distribute it to the board, and maybe on the next agenda, at least so that if we're drafting a document, you know, we're not making changes to this and a document that is generated from this. And I encourage any board member, if you get some ideas on this, send me an email, you know. This is kind of informational. We're drafting something new here. All right. Next item on our agenda is item E2.
Do we need to make a motion to table, or?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, if we don't take action, we didn't take action.
Okay.
We actually, frankly, we took a lot of action. All right, thank you, board. Next, item E2, regarding our SAW grant. Board members, we voted last October, at the October 28th meeting, to apply for a stormwater asset management and wastewater grant. We learned in the spring of this year that we were selected to receive the grant. The total value of the grant is $1,366,594, with a match required from the township of $233,309. Approximately $34,000 of that is estimated to be labor or in-kind match, and the rest would be a cash match. The first part of the work was to redesign the Beechwood Stormwater Pump Station and the Bay Haven Sanitary Sewer Pump Station, which has already been approved at the February 10th, 2014 regular board meeting. If you recall, board members, before we'd even heard that when we received the grant, we decided to go ahead with the engineering work on these two pump stations because of the critical part they play in our infrastructure. We'd had a workshop on that. So really, I'm looking for the Board of Trustees to accept the grant and approve Wade Trim to begin the third portion, or the asset management portion of this grant, based on their proposal at a cost not to exceed $608,950.
I do have a question, maybe Dave can answer it. Do we know the breakdown from the general fund to the water sewer? I'm sure the water sewer is gonna pay some of this, right? And obviously the general fund, have you talked to Glenn about the breakdown yet, or?
Not in
What's-
great detail.
As far as, I
The
don't think,
match?
Well, yeah, I mean, you
Oh.
have, you have,
I can answer.
stormwater, asset management, wastewater,
Yep.
so you're gonna have some, obviously, the sewer's gonna come from the
Water and sewer
water
fund.
sewer, and then the stormwater's gonna come from the general fund side, so I like to keep a running count in the head of my, because I'm sure that we're gonna be using our fund balance to pay for this, so I keep a running total in my head.
the asset management is solely
All sewer.
a sewer
Okay.
fund.
Yeah, sanitary
The
sewer.
sanitary sewer. The Beechwood stormwater pump would come from, the match for that would come from.
And that was
general
10%.
fund. Correct.
So I want to say, do you recall the redesign of that pump station? I know we approved it February 10th,
That's fine, I'm sure
Beechwood-
Glenn will let us
Is
know,
it
I mean, I'm sure
350?
there's,
but I want to say it was maybe 140,000 or something like that. Was it?
The design work for Beechwood Pump Station is $87,600.
Okay, so we're looking at about $8,700 coming from general fund. 90% of that comes from the grant, and then everything else comes from water and sewer.
oh, so Dave is paying for the most of this match then, huh?
Well,
Yes.
we're paying. We're just giving it to Dave to spend.
It's just that, because this is also the televising and everything of the sanitary sewers for the entire township,
Right.
so we took advantage of a very good thing.
So just to clarify, the bulk of the match, 230,000 is coming from the water and sewer fund.
Right.
Not from the general fund.
Correct. About 8,000 is gonna come from general fund, to match the engineering, and then the balance, if you'd say,
Okay.
225, of which 34,000 would be labor. It could be more, it could be less, but at least in Dave's estimate when he looked at it. So you're looking at, $8,000 from the general fund, about 180, I don't know, something like that, from the, water and sewer fund, and then 30-some thousand dollars in labor, and the rest from our money that we gave to the state, who was gracious enough to give it back.
And the water and sewer fund, I talked to Mr. Spencer today, because I had a question about where everything stood to pay for something this large. And he said our Public Works Fund, which is what's set aside for doing improvements and that kind of stuff, is right around, I think he said 2.5.
2.184.
Yeah, or no, 2.4 is what he told me today. Latest numbers was 2.45. 2.45 million set aside for projects like this.
Yes, I'm sorry, you're correct. 2,451,636 to be exact.
That was a balance in,
Well,
Public Works Fund.
That's not the total Public Works Fund, I don't believe, but it's the balance that's set
That's what
aside
we-
for Public Works, for
And
this.
when Glenn and I
project.
sat down, that's what's available, working money for projects.
Cash available on hand that's not committed for something else.
That's not committed for
Whether
something
it's
else.
funding
whether it's
or things of that
depreciation
nature.
or something else set aside for a
Right.
different purpose.
Correct, because we have more in our fund balance for water and sewer.
Correct.
But it's designated.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Also, Mr. Newmer, this process, is this grant process that you know of, is it eligible for the quarterly reimbursement? I mean, we don't do the whole project and apply for reimbursement.
The township is eligible to apply for reimbursement once per month.
Okay,
So we
monthly.
can start now that you've get all the grant papers signed and everything ready with the state, you can start requesting draws anytime.
Monthly,
Yeah.
yeah. So the actual, cash, we're spending cash. So Dave invoices us for $50,000, we turn it into the state, we pay the 50,000, the state writes us a check for 43,000, something like that, depending on what the breakdown is when here, because I think unless it goes based on the million, the first million's 10% and after that is 25%.
I believe that's how it's gonna work, but
Yeah,
we'll see when we do the first draw, how the
Correct.
state's gonna calculate that.
Right, they may look at the total split, saying, well, your first million was 10%, the second million had 25%, and we had 600,000 in there, that might add up to be an aggregate of 18%, and they might say, well, we're gonna give you 18% on every draw you make. That we don't know yet. But the point is that actual cash, we're gonna have 1 month's worth of cash that we're spending, that the state turns around and reimburses, so this shouldn't put us in a low balance situation in our projects fund.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to ask for a motion first? Because I do have a question.
Oh,
I
you
can ask
can-
it now or
Yeah,
later.
yeah, you can ask, yeah,
I
I
was
mean,
gonna-
there hasn't been a motion, but
Right.
I'm
Well, I
open
was going to
to.
ask a question of Mr. Newmer,
Go
if I
ahead.
may.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Newmer, there are, as with most grants, certain obligations that have to be fulfilled. And I note that there's a 3-year window here to fulfill certain obligations based on acceptance of the grant. And I wonder if you could take a little time and explain that to the board and to the residents, please.
Sure. There are 3 obligations that the township is undertaking by accepting this grant. And the failure mode is if you don't do these 3 things, you have to repay the grant. So, in order to keep the grant money, there's 3 things you have to do. The first one is we're doing the design engineering for the Bay Haven pump station, sanitary pump station. With that design engineering, we turn in plans and specifications to the state, that's our deliverable. And the state says, okay, fine, we paid to design that project. The township then needs to initiate construction, so you need to take bids, award a contract, and start building the project within the 3-year window. That's the first obligation. Second obligation is for the Beechwood stormwater pump station, and that's the same thing. We're doing plans and specifications for that project, so the township is obligated within a 3-year period to start construction on the project. The Bay Haven sanitary station is estimated between 400 and 450,000. That would come out of your sewer and water funds because that is a sanitary station. The Beechwood stormwater pump station is estimated between 300 and 350,000 for construction cost. There's an amount of money the township has, I believe it's 108,000, give or take, that was placed on deposit with the township some years ago by developers in the area for the improvement of that pump station. So you've got some of the funding up front. And then the rest of the funding, when the board talked about this at their work study, I believe it was your intention, or at least you were, at that point, you were leaning towards establishing a special assessment district covering the drainage area that would cover the rest of the cost of that project. The special assessment district allows us to assess the Department of Roads and the school districts, in addition to the rest of the properties that contribute stormwater to that area. So that's how those 2 projects would be funded. The third obligation you have is related to the asset management plan. And that's the kind of the focus of what we're asking to be approved for this evening is the asset management work. The obligation that you have there is you have to complete the asset management plan, complete the financial analysis, and then implement the plan according to the recommendations. Now, and we discussed this with the board at the work study as well, because this is really one of the big kind of commitments that you have. When we get done with the financial analysis and we look at your rates that you're charging for sewer, and in this case just for sewer, not for water, we will be looking at whether you are charging enough that you're maintaining a level of reinvestment in your system, or if there's disinvestment in your system. If you're not charging enough rates in order to replace what needs to be replaced and to fix what needs to be fixed and maintain what needs to be maintained, then you need to increase your rates. What the state says as part of their grant application is if the financial analysis comes back and says that a rate increase is necessary, the township is obligated to implementing at least the first 10% of that rate increase. So just for example, using round numbers, if you're charging $4 per unit right now for your sewer, and the study comes back and says you should be charging $5, not $4, the increase would be $1. You're obligated to do 10% of that, or a 10-cent increase within the first 3 years. Now, to be quite honest, that's all you need to do in order to maintain your grant. Now, the state does not say that you are obligated to implementing the other 90% of that increase, but it's their hope then that you would look at that and say, well, these are funds we really do need to set aside for these reasons, and that you would phase that in over a period of time or something like that. That's why they're asking for the 10%. So those are your three obligations: build Bayhaven,
Begin construction.
yes, begin construction on Beechwood, and then implement the asset management plan, including any rate increases if necessary. And it may come out that there's none necessary.
Unless you had a follow-up, I'm sorry.
No.
For the rate increases, let's say we look at the sanitary sewer and we find that there's a whole host of infiltration, and through that we can go and say, hey, we've identified 5 spots that if we line them, we're going to cut down on the amount of infiltration X amount. And on the other side of the coin, we also say there is a rate increase, but we can say, hey, we don't need to increase our rate because we've identified these problems that we're taking. Is there a prescriptive manner in which you could, look creatively address some of those shortfalls because of the whole totality of the plan?
Well, I think what happens is you're going to need to implement the asset management plan, which includes the recommendations from the condition assessment. So like you're talking about, if we identify areas that need to be repaired, and then we'll take those repairs into account when we do the financial analysis. So if we say, the first thing that we identify is you've got a bunch of infiltration issues that are costing you money. If we fix those, your costs are going to go from here down to here, and we can factor that into the financial analysis. So I would envision then that the financial analysis would say, if you fix the infiltration, your rate needs to be this. If you don't fix the infiltration, your rate needs to be this. And then the township can then make a decision and say, okay, we're going to fix the infiltration. The first year's projects, that's what we're going to do, and we'll go on that basis. So you're right, there may be some, and that's really the purpose of the asset management plan in its entirety, is to help you more efficiently and economically manage and maintain your system. So the state is hoping that this is ultimately going to drive down your costs.
And reduce the burden both on combined sewer overflows, reduce the burden and the require for an investment, say in our case, on our sewage treatment in Detroit, those kinds of things. Now, you did say that we don't anticipate with, I don't know how many miles we had of storm or of sanitary sewer, we're not likely to find too many silver bullets that are going to knock this down. This is likely to be comprehensive. We'll be more strategic after we go through the televising process, but there's still a fair amount of work to be done.
Yes, there is. I'll tell you, every now and then we get lucky and we find a huge manhole that's open and the river's flowing into it constantly, type of a thing. But those are pretty few and far between.
Right.
It's more likely that we will be recommending lining or sealing or crack sealing infiltration problems that will increase your costs in an incremental manner.
And then there's really two components to our sewerage charge. One is the amount that we pay, which was divided up per unit that we bill for. But then that is an amount determined ultimately by the city of Detroit, or really now through the county, the wastewater district. But then the second component is the amount of dollars and cents per unit that we tack on. So I'm gonna say, if we voted to say it's gonna be 67 cents or $1.15 or whatever that amount is that we have, that's really the amount that's kind of up for us to take a look at. We can't go, this asset management isn't gonna say we'll force the wastewater district to reduce their rates.
Correct. I guess the only way to look at that is to say, if for some reason the township, paid $3 a unit to have your sewage treated, but you only charge your residents $2 a unit,
Right.
they would say, no, you need to raise your rates because you're not covering your costs.
Correct.
That's not the case here in Harrison, because the external costs that are applied to you get passed through, and then you add to that the cost of your sewer and water department and the operations.
Right.
come
And
up with the
we've been banking money, not swimming backwards, so we know that we're not losing. We're able to put money aside for those infrastructure improvements and depreciation.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Newman.
Thank you.
I just had one more question. I know this was done in spring or winter really, and what's the timeline on, like, how long does this plan take? I mean, it's a lot of money, so I'm thinking it takes a long time, but you might say, no, it's quick.
This is gonna take us, a good probably year and a half to 2 years, I would think. There's a lot of cleaning and televising to do that takes time. We need to get, surveyors out to locate all the manholes, we need to get crews out to inspect, I forget how many thousand manholes you have.
There's approximately 89 miles of sanitary
Yeah.
sewer line.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a large task that we're undertaking, and then in addition to that, we'll be doing things like putting flow metering into the sewer system to look for those sources of inflow and infiltration. We can only do that during certain periods of the year when we're expecting wet weather, so we'll probably be looking at doing that either this fall or next spring, when we expect to have wet weather coming. Do it in the middle of August when it doesn't rain, it doesn't help you any, so. So yeah, to answer your question, I expect this will be probably a year and a half to 2 year long endeavor.
I know you mentioned silver bullets and things of that nature. Actually, one that we're taking on, the Bay Haven Station, is one of our large infiltration problems right now. So that's one that we will be eliminating right off the bat. And then to touch on what Mr. Newmer just said is he mentioned there are, thousands of manholes to locate, which some of them are literally in the swamp, like in Metro Beach area. You look out there, and 15 years ago, that was one of my jobs in the field. We went out and they all looked like giant birthday cakes because we cemented around them all and, sealed them up in the marsh because the water was extremely high then. Those are, and you look in them and those are infiltration issues. We've looked now, and even speaking with the auditors this year, once again, we had 62 water breaks this year, and the water isn't an issue. They're asking me about sanitary sewer. There are gonna be cases, I assume, and they may not be like you're saying silver bullets, so to speak, but there'll be things that make the light bulb go off to say when we're out there and you see the flow in this area where there's not a large housing project behind it, or, a neighboring, housing community, and there's a lot of flow, that's one place where we're gonna jump the gun and say, okay, this is where we need to put flow meters in first, and say, and hopefully we can nip a few of these, and make a difference right away. But any way you look at it, this is a win-win situation for Harrison Township, because ultimately it's gonna save us a lot of money. Sending our sanitary sewer to Detroit for treatment, and not to mention, we don't have overflow issues, but we do have infiltration where people use our system for their overflow, and we can stop all of that with this.
Absolutely. All right.
We haven't decided how there's mention of SADing for the Beechwood sanitary sewer. I'm gonna have a real big problem with that. We've replaced several pumps and things throughout the township over the years. We've never SAD'd it. We've always just said it's a township as there being, and we've done some, I think, through the years, and we've always paid just sort of out of general fund as needed, because it is a benefit to the whole township. I mean, if we're gonna look at doing an SAD, then we should SAD the whole township, get a pool of money, then fix all of the drains.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Couple of
just my
things there,
opinion,
yep,
but-
yep, couple of things here. The Beechwood pump station by no means services all the township. It services probably 20% of the township. So to tax everybody by using general funds, that comes with its own issues and problems. But you're right. The Board of Trustees has not made a decision on how to fund that. In that workshop, a proposal was made, and we looked at numbers of what that might be. We looked at what would happen if we expand that work to include some drain cleanouts. But we know two things. We know, number one, the Beechwood stormwater pump station definitely needs to be reconstructed. And we know, number two, the cost is gonna be a significant six-figure sum. And it has to be spent. Where the money comes from is still a decision for this board to make. But that will be general funds. The balance of the work, the Bay Haven pump station at about 450,000, and the asset management, that all comes from water and sewer.
I don't wanna just be under the misnomer that 2 years from now or 6 months from now, that I'm gonna be sitting here and, you know, we're gonna have an SAD proposal. Mr. York, you knew about this when you were voting on this tonight. That's,
Well, we're not making a decision
I
to
understand,
implement an
but
SAD, but we will cross the funding bridge at some point in the
I
future.
understand, but I've been down that road. It's just like the previous policy. I've learned that's the policy, so you need to put it in. There's no interpretation of the policy. You need to put it in. So when I hear SAD, that's for a discussion or how to fund it for a whole nother day.
True,
All right.
right. Well, one thing for sure,
Just want to make clear.
only one guy is paying for the Beechwood stormwater pump station, and that's you and me and the other 25,000 people, or
Right.
some percentage of them that live within a drainage district. That's for us to decide. Whether it comes from the general fund, in which case we put the money in, or it comes from an SAD, which case we put the money in. So,
Well, I mean, that discussion, I mean, obviously is going to have somewhat of a debate.
Sure.
And you know, if once you start doing that, then you do it all over the township, right? You can't say, well, we're going to just do SAD these people for the Beechwood, but, oh, down on Lake Shore, we're going to take that money from general fund, or we're over here in this area fixing the drains.
Right, we have to be careful how we set the precedent.
Right, that's my concern.
Make a motion to accept the stormwater asset management and wastewater grant and approve Wade Trim to begin the asset management portion of the grant at a cost not to exceed $608,950.
all right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Brado. We've had a fair amount of discussion, but board members, is there any discussion?
Mr. Supervisor, Mr. Supervisor, I would just say that I think that the maintenance and improvement of the sewer infrastructure system is critical. And I believe this to be an excellent opportunity for the township to take advantage of this grant. Obviously, other political subdivisions think the same, since 673 applied for grants. So this would appear to be a very good idea and something important for the township. So I just wanted to make that comment and observation.
Yep, very good. Any other board comment? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Brado to accept the stormwater asset management and wastewater grant and approve Wade Trim to begin the asset management portion of the grant at a cost not to exceed $608,950. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on our agenda. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item F, public comment. We'll open up the floor for public comment on any subject, and we ask that folks limit their comments to 5 minutes or less.
It's on all the time. It's supposed to be.
Wally?
Is the blue light on?
Is it-
It's disconnected?
Is it plugged in?
Well, then, it's disconnected. There. There should be a blue light.
It's on.
Now it's
All
on.
right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned something.
Well, I've never spoke before, so this is a new experience for me. My name is Christy Wall, 39876 Shoreline Drive, Harrison Township. I have a
Hold on, I'm sorry. Our audio,
Yeah, it shut off.
it's off again?
Yeah.
Andrew, squeeze that connection down there.
Is it on the?
It's in the connection between the two.
You're good now. I'll stand right here just in case it goes out.
Okay, try this one more time. My name is Christine Ewald, 39876 Shoreline Drive, Harrison Township. Lifelong member of the township. I grew up out here since 1954. I have a comment to make on this library millage that's coming about. Number one, I don't think the township needs a library. If they want to have the temporary, the part-time, I think that's fine. But I cannot justify the money that is going to be put into this. I got a thing in the mail showing that they said they got a 453% growth. I contacted them and said, well, what are your numbers? What is the 453% based on? Nobody has any numbers. When people don't give you numbers, it's time to run. Figuring from looking at their budget proposal, they're saying they're going to have $256,517 for wages and benefits. That's 61% of the budget. So I did some math. Looking at their wages, they're going to be open at 40 hours a week, average. So I kind of did a simple 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. I realize there's days there's going to be off and so forth. But for simplistic numbers, we're talking $986 a day for this library. I think that is an astronomical number for 1/5, not even that, because the only number we had was 250. At 453% increase, that makes another 1,133, plus the 250, 1,383 cards. Now, I was told, oh, well, we got at least 4 people per card, which I find to be a rather large number. So I cannot justify $980-some a day for 4 or 5 people to sit in a library that is servicing maybe 1,000 people or families in this township. We had an agreement at one point with L'Anse Creuse High School to use the high school for the library. This agreement disappeared when Macomb County shut down their library due to the lack of people not using it. This is 2014. People are not using libraries like they have in the past. Everybody's kids are going online and doing their work, or they're doing it in their high schools. I have a couple questions. Number one, who's going to control the money for this group? And are they going to be required to give complete disclosure on their expenditures in detail? Now, if this should pass, okay, where are the people going to go to put in their applications for the jobs? Or are they just going to give it to the people that have been volunteering? And second, who is going to be responsible for making this decision on hiring these people? Like I stated before, there was going to be an agreement with the high school. I know this is fact. I know the person that was working at the high school at the time, working on the plans to put a separate entrance and driveway for the township residents to use the library. When Macomb County said, take our shelves and books, they go, oh, we'll do it. And okay, we'll be a library, but we're all going to be strictly volunteer. So of course that happened. We got the volunteer library. I hear that, okay, everybody goes, well, then we can belong to the suburban library corporate cooperative. Now, anybody in the county can become a member of the cooperative. It's $200 per household. And you can go to the 21 libraries in the township with all of the benefits. Another option for most people is Amazon Prime. It's $99 a year, and it covers books, music, television, and everything else. I encourage everybody that's got a ballot to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. I'll do the,
I think I have one.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, come on up. Sorry about that. Yeah, yep, I'm sorry. We usually have folks on the on-deck chair, but I understand. That's no problem. Come on right up, and you're welcome to speak.
Never been here.
Yeah, that's all right. No
My
problem.
name's Tom Blakesley. I lived here since middle 70s, born and raised in Roseville. I'm retired. The discussion you had on engineering costs and all that kind of stuff reminded me of my old job. I spent 20 years in Worldwide Facilities Group and General Motors trying to figure out where to spend such, resources, and we never have enough money to maintain things. So it's kind of interesting. Anyways, what I want to say is probably won't help the expenses of Harrison Township at all. I want to talk about the water bill. And I don't really want to talk about what water costs, because I think we got the best water in the world, and I have no problem with what I pay. And I think several years ago, I was in office with Kim, weren't you the treasurer once?
The supervisor.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I did something a couple weeks ago, remind me of the issue I have with the water bill. The first thing is, on the water bill, down here in the right-hand corner, it says whatever you owe, but it really doesn't, it's not what you owe, it's what you owe if you don't pay on time. So I was in a hurry, I was going on vacation with the family. I got this thing on Saturday the 21st, I got like 2 weeks to pay it, going on vacation, so I got 4 or 5 days. So wrote a check, ran down to the treasurer's office, stood in line here, everybody complaining about it. But I paid the wrong amount, I paid more than I should have, because I was on time. And the lady says, everybody does it all the time. Well, I've been paying by a check for the last several years, and I hear people stand in line in front of me, and people, unfortunately, see this part here, and they pay that. And it's really not what they owe. What they owe is pay by the due date, and most bills you get at home, if you ever look at them, in the corner will be the number that you owe. It never says what you do if you're late. So I wrote the check, and I didn't want to go home and change the check, so I paid it, and that reminded me of all my trials and tribulations with the water bill. I pay all my bills online at Comerica Bank. The only one I can't pay online, I pay 50 bills a month probably, is this water bill. I have to write a check or go to the treasurer's office. I assume everybody in the township has the same issue with the water bill that I do. I got it on the 21st of June. I got 10 days to pay it. I don't know anybody that's got bills that's only got 10 days to pay it at work, 60, 90, 120, whatever. But basically, as a citizen, you've got about 10 days to pay this bill. You stuff it in your drawer and you forget to pay it, and you write a check, send it in the mail. It says right on here you got about 7 business days. I doubt that it takes 7 business days, but in reality, you got 2 weeks to pay this bill. Now, my mother's retired.